Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our case deep dive. So delighted to have Lizabeth Wesely-Casella with us today to talk through workforce collaboration with remote teams. So excited. Lizabeth has lots of experience in doing this work, and she's a dear friend and a colleague, and we're just thrilled to have her here. So Lizabeth, the floor is yours. And I know that Lizabeth has asked if you guys have questions, feel free to put it in chat. If you really want to interrupt, if that's appropriate, feel free to do so, because she's not going to be able to see your hands right when she's presenting. So we'll let you all flow as you need to. So Lizabeth, go ahead and take it away.
Fantastic. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for showing up this morning. I am Lizabeth Wesely-Casella. My firm is L12 Services, and we're going to be talking about enhancing collaboration and streamlining workflow among remote teams. A little bit of background why I'm qualified to be here to talk to you today. I have been here in the district for 23 years. I got here right at the turn of the millennium, which sounds really old. And I came here from Arizona, where I was a project manager for commercial and industrial construction. So I brought my project management skills with me and started working heavy duty in various associations, some really strong organizations like the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. And no matter what association I partnered with over those first few years, I found myself doing a job that was never in my job description. Whether I was the, grassroots coordinator or director of membership and events, or even executive virtual assistant, I would be working in the boardroom with leadership, but I would be having lunch with the people who did the jobs. And I found there was this huge chasm of information. It was a void. Either it was where information went to die or it was misinformation. So I kept reconstructing mechanisms where people understood better what was going on, whether it was the mission, vision, and values, or processes, or programs, or launches. I really kind of dug into that area. And, when I was doing this, people weren't really talking about internal comms, at least not in the way that they are today. So, ignorance is bliss. I didn't know what I didn't know, so I wasn't terrified when I packed up my box and said, hi, I'm going to go build a business. I'll talk to you guys later. And that was about 14, 15 years ago. Since then, I decided the one thing that I did know was that I am terrified of public humiliation, and I did not want to start a business only for it to fold up in 6 months. So I thought that I would test this business in my area of issue advocacy, which is eating disorders and weight stigma prevention. And so for a couple of years, I bounced around to the major eating disorders associations so that we refined the services, we refined the languaging. We really figured out how to help people in the way that they needed help, not just speaking from a place of knowledge. And so over the past 14 years, I've built up a team here. My background is internal communications and Lean Six Sigma. And my other external facing colleague, she is all the things I'm not. She's organizational development and industrial psychology and design. So I like to say that together we make one really great human being. And so when people work with us, they have the benefit of all of the nerdiness of Lean Six Sigma, all of the human side of design and industrial psychology. And we work with organizations all across the spectrum, but my heart has always been in associations. That's where I started. It takes specific kind of people to thrive in associations, because usually, let's face it, associations have challenges with resources. Oftentimes they have challenges with leadership, and the people who work for them are very mission driven. So they're very heartfelt people. They don't come to work to get rich. They come to work to do a job that changes society. So as we've gone on over the last 3 years, during and past the pandemic, we've really done our best to dive in with associations, knowing that during these various transitions, that would be where the people who have heart that matters really need the most help. How do we make the work world, a better and more enjoyable place for them to work? So I will say that In full transparency, one among your numbers has been a client of mine. We've really enjoyed our contract together. And we are, looking forward to helping as many organizations as we can. I'll add the caveat. What I'm going to be delivering today is a bunch of knowledge. This is really a huge information sector to cover in a short amount of time. So I'll be touching on some things at a high level, but any ideas that you have or questions that you have or tools that you might hear me mention and that you want to, engage with, please feel free to let me know, because anybody in my position, who's worth their salt, who has a good reputation, our whole goal is to make sure that you have internal communications and collaboration that works for you, because now is the time for us to be able to change the way that the world works. We can create that environment where people enjoy being in the ecosystem and truly want to invest of themselves in their organization. So without further ado, I'll get on to the good stuff, but please know that if there's anything that I've mentioned that I either go over too quickly or that you want to dive into a little bit deeper, I am happy to make time at any point on the calendar and give that to you. So here we go. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of different areas. We're going to start out with the 8 wastes of lean and how they manifest in associations. I see a smile there on Dan's face. Maybe he's a little bit of a lean guy. We're going to talk about the interdependencies map of communications and workflow. And I will warn you in advance, that graphic is going to make your head explode a little bit because it's very busy, but we're going to unpack it and make it a lot easier to understand. But it's intended to show you all of the places where internal communications connect with your operations and how it's important to utilize it, leverage it, and why it's important to have a clean, clear strategy. We're going to talk about how to reach people and connect them, which means I'm going to be talking a little bit about a couple tools to use. They're, just 2 or 3 of many that we deploy depending on the scenario. So if we're not talking about a tool that sounds like it makes sense to you, that's not the end of the story. Please let me know if you need me to help you think of anything different, because we've been doing this a really long time with organizations from 10 to 2,000 people. And then we'll talk about the concerns and impediments that you shared with me during the survey. Anyone who wasn't able to take the survey, it was just a quick set of questions asking about whether or not you have a single source of truth, whether or not you spotlight certain individuals. And at the end, it asks about your concerns for implementing collaborations and the impediments to it. And overall, I found that the answers were very similar. So I think that anyone who wasn't able to participate in that may still be able to have their questions answered as we move forward. So, why is collaboration important for remote teams? Time, money, and talent. We all know this. It requires you to look at your teams to make sure that they're efficiently using their time, you're efficiently using your money in order to support them, and that talent is happy where they're at because they know where to go, they know what to do, they know the information that they need and where to get it. Collaboration helps us really move our projects forward quickly with fewer defaults, with fewer defects, with fewer errors, and usually in an environment where people are much more confident. So that increases speed as well. I'm pretty sure none of you got to the positions that you're at without knowing this, but it is always good to have a quick bottom line slide that says exactly what it is that's impacted by both collaboration and internal communications. So let's quickly dip into the lean side of things and how I have kind of taken that theory and adjusted it for the type of work that we do. We use lean theory. Traditionally, lean theory has been part of the manufacturing world, and it talks about defects in products, and it talks about the 8 wastes, and it also talks about, and this is why I love it, how to use the people who have the institutional knowledge within your organization to help you solve the problems. That's why when I got this education, it linked really well with my drive to help organizations or people in general, actually, communicate better, because I believe that lost communication is a waste. And I know that Shira sent around the invitation, including a link to both the latest Gallup polling about the worldwide workspaces, and mentioned a statistic that I've been using since 2019, that in 2019, American business and the business ecosystem lost over $550 billion due to poor internal and communication. If you can think of what that means in 2019 and wrap your head around that, extrapolate to what it means in 2020 when we had the transition to remote work that nobody was prepared for, and subsequently the years where we've tried to implement hybrid and probably haven't had an opportunity to dive deep and really look at our operations and our processes. How much money have we left on the table because we didn't communicate in a way that made sense to our teams? So we're trying to fix that. And so we're always looking at the 8 wastes in one way or another to see how we can reduce those and make your communications more streamlined. So for example, in our world, in the administrative and association world, the waste of waiting can mean the lack of information or the inability to find it, or meeting burnout. The waste of motion is unnecessary steps in a process. Non-utilized talent or underutilized talent means that you're not engaging and informing the people who have really great ideas on your team and making them feel comfortable enough that they should bring their innovative ideas to you. Those ideas often end up being game changers and saving time or saving people's movement, the waste of movement, in order to be able to solve a problem. And we go down the line with, extra processing, which means complicated processes. In our world, the waste of defects often shows itself as poor customer service. Overproduction, meaning not sunsetting projects, having people work on too many projects or too many services, some of which really aren't a priority, and those that are a priority haven't been listed in the order of priority. Organizations that we talk to right now are frequently kind of suffering with too many things and too little accountability, meaning they haven't let their team members know these 3 things are the things that all of your attention should be on. And if you have extra attention or extra time, you can pay attention to other things. However, we want you to have these 3 things top of mind all the time. Or they say, we've been producing this handbook for the past 20 years, and it's just part of who we are, but they know that it's really not used by their membership. So sunsetting projects is really important. It helps to save time, it helps to save money, and it keeps your people feeling less stressed, less overwhelmed, and more sane. And then the waste of transportation, that's kind of iffy these days with people coming into the office, not coming into the office, but unnecessary movement. I'm guessing that most of us aren't transporting massive quantities of product somewhere, but for those that are, making sure that your transportation routes are streamlined and up to date using the latest IT like ways in order to get where you need to be. But the bottom line is that in hybrid and work models, or hybrid and remote work models, especially in our world, these wastes do negatively impact collaboration. If you're waiting for information, that really means that you're waiting to figure out who you need to interact with on any given project. Or if you have a waste of inventory, then your people are looking at the resources available to them, and they're either overwhelmed or they're not the right resources for what they're doing. So these 8 wastes can apply within your organization to collaboration, process improvement, and production. So here's just a quick slide that can kind of, get you thinking about the other things regarding collaboration that we don't always talk about. The pieces that collaboration will support extend throughout your organization, and I'm sure you already know that. But for some organizations right now, their annual pulse survey is really important. They're trying to find out, or you're trying to find out, what your people know, what they need, where you need to strengthen or brush up on things. And the most often score that I hear organizations wanting to improve is pride of employment. So collaboration helps to support pride of employment by giving people the knowledge and the means to understand who they need to be collaborating with, who do they need to meet to solve a problem or face a challenge, or create a project or a program together. Oftentimes when people say that they have low pride of employment scores, it's because they don't have, switch to the other top box, organizational awareness. And organizational awareness manifests itself by having a place in your knowledge repository where people can go not just to see a list of who your staff are and their contact information, but actually a description of each of your departments and the key people within those departments beyond leadership that may need to be contacted for any given collaborative opportunity. Real quick. The organizational awareness piece, I'm going to come back to several different times through these slides because it can be housed in your single source of truth. And from the survey, I saw that a good number of you have a single source of truth, an intranet or SharePoint that you use, but maybe you're not using it to the most, to the highest capability. And what you'll want to consider as we go through and as you move into the future is having a piece of organizational awareness tied to that tool. Having pages or portals that describe the different departments, that tell the key people that are within those departments, that talk about the metrics that define success for those departments, so that people really feel as though they know not just where they work and the team that they work within, but they understand the different arms of the organization and how they pertain to different projects, different ideas, or different collaborations. Now, obviously, collaboration also is a great means of creating accountability and efficiency. And another important piece that kind of attaches to organizational awareness is that collaboration and clear internal communication helps overcome inbox and meeting overwhelm. And in smaller organizations, that's a problem because it's different when you're in an enterprise size organization, when you may be tagging everyone in a couple different departments to make sure that you've reached everybody and nobody gets left out during a project meeting or a launch meeting. In smaller organizations, it's no longer bound to a couple different departments. It's usually bound to the entire organization. So if there's a project or a program that's just starting to roll out, you're in the discovery phases, you haven't necessarily launched yet, somebody always ends up sending out a meeting email that goes out to everyone to make sure that everyone is informed when not necessarily everyone is interested or should be involved. This also turns into the email threads that are never ending and CC everyone. So a certain amount of email etiquette, a certain amount of understanding who belongs on which teams and what types of work involve different departments or different specific staff members, collaboration can help refine that and keep that inbox and meeting overwhelm to a minimum. Are there any questions at this point that I should stop for? Nope. Good. Okay. So here's the slide that I warned you about. I know that this is a very busy slide, and anybody that has any marketing background knows you never make a slide like this, but this is really important. It's very purposeful, and it's intended to show you how internal communication touches every part of your operations.
Elizabeth, can you make that any bigger? In my view, it's like shrunk down because of whatever screen it's on. So I got black on both sides. I don't know if there's, so I can't read.
I had the same problem, Jennifer, and I just actually just expanded my view. I literally just went into the touch screen and just expanded it out, and then it worked.
Okay, sorry. Didn't mean to technology interrupt. Maybe I'll just make it the only thing.
No, it's not a problem, and I haven't heard that before, but I think I have a workaround. Would it be okay, Shira, if I shoot this slide set to you in email and everybody can have a copy? I can't see.
Please,
okay.
Please do, and I'll get that out to everybody right away.
Okay.
I also changed my view, Shira, and just hid everybody's beautiful faces today. So I apologize for that since I can't see anybody, just the slides.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No
Apologies.
problem.
Okay.
Let me stop sharing real quick and
Wow.
you all talk amongst yourselves. And stop share. There we go. And I apologize for that. I haven't run into that before, but it's close enough to a Monday that it makes perfect sense that tech gremlins would do this. So Shira.
Themselves. I'm interested if people have seen collaboration be much more difficult in virtual offices.
Yes. Yes.
We're talking about going all virtual, and I'm really interested in how collaboration is going to be affected by that. My team has historically been pretty collaborative.
We found with our team, and we had a tradition of non-virtual that flipped to virtual, and now nobody wants to come back. But when they come together, so creating space for the right reason to collaborate, creativity, and we label them. Culture, we're coming together to have fun today. Creativity, brainstorming, project management. So I think you still have to have some of, I don't know. We're going to see what Lizabeth says. But at the same time, when you looked at the 8 elements, I can see different components based on subcultures. You know, everybody has the same kind of culture mindset, strong link to mission, but subcultures across the enterprise are different. So that to me is another one of those considerations. Is it's not one answer, it's a different answer for each one of the subcultures. I don't know if that makes sense. That's what I'm experiencing, at least. And my team's 70 plus, 72, 73.
Shira, are we good? Did you get that?
I'm sure I will soon. I have a very strong spam filter, but as soon as I get it, I will send it out.
All right.
Feel free to keep going.
Okay. Super. Thank you all for bearing with me through that. When you eventually see this, it's more than just a green snowflake. What we have here is just kind of a framework of a typical association. In the lower left-hand side, we have kind of a gray, light green circle that says messaging campaigns. That is the beginning of the internal comms spigot, so to speak. The darker green circles are your internal comms channels, like a newsletter, an intranet, a project management tool, internal podcasting. And some of you may have all of these and more. Some of you may have just a couple of them, but your tools in order to communicate are the next step after you've identified what your messaging looks like. I say that first to say that that is the foundation that you use to strategically deploy your internal your internal communication. And that helps you mitigate the 8 wastes throughout your organization by creating an environment that encourages collaboration by clarifying and strengthening your internal comm strategy. When you're able to see into this graphic a little bit more, you'll see that there are smaller colored bubbles within this Venn diagram, and they're sitting between different channels, and they're just an example of different parts of the organization that are impacted by internal communications. So whether it's benefits and wellness awareness, or it's collaboration or professional development or change management or relationship and mentorship development, all of these areas are touched by internal communication, and they all impact collaboration. Someday, when I figure out how to do it and who to hire in order to do this, I'm going to take this Venn diagram and turn it into a 3D model, kind of like when we were in high school and they showed you the model of the atom, that kind of hub and spoke thing that you can turn around, and here's your neutrons and your electrons and all of that, and have the tensile strength between all of the different programs and processes, something that you can actually see. But until we get there, unfortunately, 2D is the way that we need to roll with this. Now that I've shown you the complex picture, I want to kind of tease it out and pull it apart to allow you to see that it's always it's always complex. You need to think and create strategy, and planning surrounds your internal communications and your collaboration. However, oh, now I'm not, there we go. However, rule number one is internal communications is complex, but it should not be complicated. The purpose of a strong internal communications plan is to uncomplicate what you need to share and how you need to communicate with your staff. The important piece to all of this is that internal communications is about organizing your information so that you have a handle on it, and so you can anticipate enough flexibility for things that come up that you don't anticipate to roll into your internal communications. And I don't want you to think of internal comms specifically as the I have information, I want to give it to you. I want you to also think about it as your knowledge base and your learning repository and the place where people go for their handbook and the place where people go to learn about other people. It's more than just a one-way street. It is definitely supposed to be a dialogue where you have a two-way street and a feedback mechanism involved. But it's not just conversation, and it's not just for sending information out. It's for keeping information, and the right information. With a strong plan, you will know what your people need. You'll be providing them what they need before they ask for it. And they'll be comfortable enough that you're interested in their knowledge base and their level of confidence, that they will help you add to that. So it will become something very robust over time. So we can kind of break this down into 8 different steps, for lack of a better word. The first one, though, would be to understand culture types. I heard you about the cultures. Understand your culture types, their drivers, and their communications needs. We use a tool called the Helix assessment. And that tool is, similar to all of the other assessments out there, Myers-Briggs or DISC or whatever. It is talking about how to group people with similar traits together into an understandable, definable, chunk of your organization. However, unlike Myers-Briggs and DISCs and all the others, those are about, I know something about me and I know something about you, and I'm going to temper my conversation so that you and I have great communication together. And it's a wonderful, all of those tools are really, really good. We've, in one way or another, over the past number of years, worked with organizations as they've deployed those assessments.
Elizabeth,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. So Jennifer had a question. Does the overall model work with Gallup's tools, the Q12 and strengths?
Yeah, we're a strengths-based Q12 organization, both internally and with our volunteer community. So everybody has that same mindset. Thank you, Sheriff, for asking.
Actually, Jennifer, if you could clarify your question a little bit, are you asking if Helix works with that, or if an internal comms?
No, the balance of the flow, because that's an institutionalized function organizationally. So if there's an assessment as we go through the balance of the functions, will I be able to see flow through? Because again, that's our organizing structure that deploys resources, builds capacity, etc., if that makes sense.
I think that the difference in this type of assessment is, you could, I'm sure, create an interaction between the findings from the Helix assessment and the structure that you're talking about. But the way that we use it as a contractor specifically tuned to internal comms is that we use this assessment to help us create the types of communication and messaging that reach the types of people in the way that they need it, the information being written and structured to be tailored to those culture needs. I'll explain a little bit more about it, and maybe it'll answer the question. And if it doesn't, we can talk offline about how it would, how it would apply to your specific needs, whether it's organizational or whether it's for just a specific component of operations. But when we look at the Helix assessment, it's about communicating with teams. So what I get to see on the back end and obviously share with you as the client is the breakdown within 4 quadrants telling me if your people need to have the dots connected very closely and all of your messaging anticipate the why and the how of decisions that are made, or if they're more of the, choose your own adventure. They need to know the goal, but they don't want a lot of guardrails between where they hear about what you want for an outcome and how they get there. There's a spectrum of culture types, and we're able to take that snapshot, whether it's a department or it's the organization as a whole, and help you create the type of communication and the means for connecting people that make the most sense for the way that your team likes to work. So instead of being a one-to-one, it's a one-to-many. And that kind of differentiates it from most of the other assessments out there. Was that helpful? Okay.
Keep going. I want to be a tractor.
Okay.
And Elizabeth, since we've pressed pause on the presentation, unfortunately my spam filter is still it's filtery, so I still haven't received the presentation. Would you do me a favor and just upload the presentation in the chat box for folks? That'll just be a little easier.
Sure. I'm not sure if I don't think it will allow me to while the file's in use.
Ah, okay, got it. Well, I'm sorry everyone for the technical difficulty. Hopefully everyone is able to see the screen properly. Okay, so maybe you don't need it. Keep going. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right, and my apologies too. Next, we're going to want to assess and prioritize your comm channels. So that's basically a channel assessment, easy to do through surveys or focus groups, finding out whether or not your people are even using all of the channels, or if there are so many channels, they're kind of overwhelmed and confused and don't feel as though they really know what information goes on which channel or where to find things easily. Again, we're trying to address that, waste of waiting and waste of movement looking for stuff. Developing a messaging cadence. This sounds super no-brainer and really, really easy, but it's critically important. And here's why. When you're developing your message cadence, if you're going to create a content or an editorial calendar, depending on which phrase you use, having an understanding at the get-go of what all of your annual messages are, your annual benefits enrollment, what time of the year it happens, having that on your calendar, the summer potluck, the quarterly all staff meetings, being able to plan and plot out when those messages are due, backtrack and reverse engineer how long it's going to take you to create the various messages that need to go out, on which channels and in which way, what resources you're going to need to use. It is worthwhile to undertake this as an annual or a biannual activity, just to refresh what you've got going on and to see what you've going on in the future. Because, and here's just a mini case study. Most all organizations that we've worked with, and I live here in DC, so everybody I know is part of an association. If they've gone back to work, hybrid model, core days, they went through that process over a series of months, anywhere from a year to, 9 months. They developed their messaging, they got IT on board, they got facilities on board, they made sure that everybody had everything well in advance of when they were going to, flip the switch on that. I've got a client that decided to do all that in 7 weeks. As you can imagine, it was a little bit scary. Everybody put their roller skates on and they went and did everything as fast as they could. But it was only through the fact that we had a very flexible content calendar that we were able to make sure that, within this 1,000-person staff footprint all over the nation, people knew where to go. They knew whether they were required to come back into work. They knew what to do with the machinery that they'd taken home in 2020. They knew what the parking situation was going to be. They knew what was going to happen with their benefits and their work from home stipend. We were able to get the message out and make that transition for the staff members as smooth as possible in that very short amount of time, because we had the tool to use and people were familiar with using it. Had we not had that, It would have been just a fire hose of messages upon messages going out to people in an environment where people who weren't always at their desk, so your deskless workers, maybe their facilities or call center, they weren't always reading all of their emails because, quite frankly, their time on the job was dedicated to not being at their desk. So reading things meant they had to do it on their off hours. We worked with that organization over the last year and a half to bring their comms into line with the deskless workers and those that are at their desk in a meaningful way, so that when something came across their radar, whether it was through email or through any other means, people paid attention and it didn't turn into white noise. So developing message cadence may seem like a no-brainer, but it's actually really worthwhile digging in on. It will save you money and it will save your people a ton of frustration and time. Designing messaging campaigns. I have the messaging campaign model over here on the right, and that's a tool that we've developed over the years to help the content creators within an organization understand just how to create a campaign. It's more than just sending out messages every so often. It's utilizing your various channels. It's utilizing different techniques in order to get the message across, having it housed in a repository where people can go back and look historically through the information that's been distributed. And I'm happy to share that with you. Actually, at the end of this slide, there are, I believe, 6 different tools that I've put in this deck. So I'm glad Shira is going to be sharing it with you. I was going to ask her to regardless. There are some tools that you'll be able to walk away with after we're done and look at. If you want the actual documents, you can always contact me and I'm happy to forward them on. But the messaging campaign model, if you look at it from a 35,000-foot view, it's a list of different activities that you need to undertake, which complement your content calendar so that you can get the right messages out the right way. And then to build off of that is, how do you write your messages? Always write with brevity. In today's environment, people make an assessment whether or not they're going to read an email or they're going to look at a website and dive deeper into it in less than 5 seconds. It's just the way that our brains have learned how to trigger in this online environment. Online information, whether it's an email, that electric light behind your message, it kicks something off in your brain that makes you make split-second decisions, and it's based on dopamine. Is this going to make me happy to read, or is it just going to be something that makes me crazy to read? And I just learned a phrase a while ago, maybe you all know this, but it's TLDR, too long didn't read. And I've got a collaboration going with a friend who has a client that people will respond to organizational emails with TLDR, too long didn't read, so that people, I guess, who are creating the content know that it wasn't effective. Seems a little bit snarky and aggressive to me, but apparently it's something that people do. So you want to make sure that what you're sending out that's really important information doesn't fall in that TLDR, too long didn't read category. You want it to be brief, you want it to be punchy, you want people to understand why it matters, what it is, how to implement it or how to use it or how to deploy it, and who to contact if they have questions. So write with brevity, and we've got some brevity writing tools in the later slides for you. Create accountability for content management. This is another area where organizations fall. And I think
Lizabeth, I'm so sorry, can I interrupt you real quick? Elia had raised a hand, I believe, about the writing with brevity piece.
Yeah. So do you have any guidelines or even statistics on what is brevity? Is it 3 sentences max, or is it totally culture dependent, or is there a general rule? And is it dependent on generational? Like, can I write to a fellow boomer in 5 sentences or a whole paragraph? Some guidelines.
If you're writing to Gen X and Boomer, make sure that you're using excellent punctuation. Apparently that's the thing for us. Yes, we do have tools that can help guide you through that. And depending on the this is where writing with brevity and the Helix assessment really is a beautiful marriage. Because if you understand what your people need to know and you can write to them with brevity, you are closing that knowledge gap quicker and easier than you would if you're trying to write something from scratch. Oftentimes as writers, we want to communicate everything we know about a subject, and we're writing from the place of knowledge. Brevity tools that we share with you will help you to understand how to write from the reader's perspective and what their needs are and anticipating their questions. And you're right, it does mean different things in different environments, which we can help you work through. But even as an activity or a habit, writing with brevity is just kind of helpful in every area of life these days. It's difficult. I think maybe it was Tennyson that wrote, I'm so sorry for this long letter. I would have written you a short one, but I didn't have time. It's difficult to write with brevity until you get the muscle memory to do it. And it means, embracing subject lines that are ideally 6 words or less. It means having bullet points and bolded font that say why this matters, or other prompts like that, so people can skim and read and get to the meat of things if they need to. There's at least one tool at the end of this, but I have more if you'd like to talk this through later. I'm happy to share those. But brevity writing tools, you don't necessarily need to use ours. There are other groups out there. It's actually funny. Anybody who's familiar with Axios, whether you're using their software as your AI writing tool or not, they came out with a book called Smart Brevity. And it is the longest book about brevity you will ever read. It's filled with some really great tools and rules and information, but it was written as though the people who were writing the book had never listened to themselves speak. It goes on forever. So we take ours and we try and boil them down to the must-know bullet point infographic kind of stuff, and we'll talk you through the rest of it. But there are other tools out there if you feel like you'd like to search the landscape for a variety of answers. Creating accountability for content management, as I said, it's an area where smaller organizations who don't see the value of their internal communications tool, namely their single source of truth, an intranet or a SharePoint. If you don't see the value for that, you probably haven't assigned anybody to regularly manage that content. And the trickle-down effect of that is that staff doesn't trust that that's where they're supposed to go to get their questions answered. They have a history of not being able to find what they need to become self-selected knowledge purveyors. They also will, be on the page and see, last June's quarterly video from the, chairman of the board talking about what's happening this year, and they're talking about 2022. Information hasn't been recycled out. It hasn't been filtered correctly. It hasn't been organized correctly. So if you're going to use a single source of truth, SharePoint or any other product, you need to have people who are accountable for managing that space. So assign that project to someone, or put it in their job description, or have it be part of a team's responsibility, and have them designate the people within the team that are to take care of it. If you have an internal comms department, this should be part of their regular job, because the thing that you want, your goal at the end of the day, is to have one place that houses your information that everybody can go to and feel informed. Taking the bandwidth pressure off of, let's say, HR, the people who end up fielding most of the questions from staff, or having to take all of the pressure off of your comms to always be the one place that, like your newsletter. If your newsletter says the same information over and over about a launch or an initiative, you think you've answered that question. Quite often people aren't reading your newsletter, or they're not absorbing it, or it doesn't have the right information. So having your newsletter have a piece of information about that launch or initiative, and have the rest of the body of knowledge of that launcher initiative on your single source of truth makes a lot of sense, because people can go there and answer their own questions. And that's what we're really trying to get to, a place where people feel confident that they have the knowledge that they need. They know that they know where to go to get it. And that helps them collaborate better, because next to that knowledge about the launch or the initiative is also the knowledge about what the different departments do, what the people within those departments do, who and how to contact them. So all of this, as you can see by the colors, layers on itself in one way or another. And these aren't steps that need to be taken necessarily in this order. These are just things to keep in mind as you're building out your strategy. You need to make sure that you provide a feedback mechanism, because as I said earlier, internal comms and collaboration, they're not about one person directing all of the information to another person. It's about a two-way street, being able to ask questions, being able to get clarification, being able to learn more. So if you have a feedback mechanism, a line at the bottom of your newsletter that says, if you have more questions, contact info@association.com, make sure you have somebody assigned to answer those emails or that phone call or that chat, so that it's not just going off into the ether. Again, this is about building trust and confidence in the ability for your staff to get the information that they need. And then, launch your intranet with feedback from your team. Create a great UX. UX stands for user experience. The best internets aren't the most beautiful ones. They're the ones that have the information organized in a way that the staff finds useful. You don't need to go out and get somebody to make you the most lovely graphics or have all of the knowledge about the back end of SharePoint to make it beautiful. What you need is feedback from your staff, so that when they go to that resource, they see themselves in there. They don't just see the brand and the organization and the information that you want them to know. They see opportunity to learn more, opportunity for professional or personal development, opportunity for access to a learning library, opportunity for them to be a self-served person with their knowledge needs. Being able to be autonomous and look for their own information is very important to staff. It builds trust and it builds confidence. So a little bit more about the single source of truth, your one location with zero chaos. Leverage that repository. Do things that are helpful to the staff beyond just announcing what it is that you're interested in this quarter. Have a spotlight for your team. Interview, and this is also a theme that is going to be repeating, but a spotlight for your team, meaning every so often at a regular cadence in your newsletter or your e-blast email, interview a team member. Use a picture, have a set list of questions, have them be pretty much the same across the board, and feature or highlight somebody talking about not just what it is that you do for your job, but what did you do at another job, what brought you into this industry, what gives you joy, what excites you, what kind of work do you like. And make sure that people have an opportunity to see that in your first channel, whether it's a newsletter or an e-blast, and then greater detail linked in your single source of truth. This is another great way for people who want to collaborate to look for each other and find each other. I'm gonna a little bit later share a story about why this is important and how I've seen it be successful. But to move on, describe your departments so that you
Elizabeth, sorry to interrupt you again. So TJ has a question, probably about this spotlight your team members.
Hi, TJ.
Oh, hi, how are you? No, just in general, and as you go through this, to what extent is it scalable? I mean, we have a staff of 7 now, and we all know each other. Like, we kind of know what we're doing, I guess. So can you talk a little bit about that? I guess, yeah, as you go on.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to be speaking next month at DC Startup Week, and that's all about early stage entrepreneurs and small teams. And I'm going to be sharing this information with the twist that you're talking about, why it's important to start building these even rudimentary versions of them now, because later on, maybe the situation is that you scale up, or later on, maybe you want to go on vacation. You want to have the documentation in place for people to answer their own questions. For example, if you have the opportunity to go on a holiday break, and somebody else needs to obviously not take over your position because you're CEO, but do some of the tasks that you perform, having a knowledge repository that includes a visual workflow for the things that you check on during the day to make sure that your operations are afloat, or an SOP that tells them when in the month they need to, look at paychecks. I don't know, some of the tasks that you would pass on to somebody else. You're never too small to start documenting and creating tools around these, because when you get to the place where you need them, A, you don't have to create them, and B, it dramatically reduces the amount of time that it takes to train somebody up to fulfill those obligations. So if we're talking about an intranet for a team of 7, it may be that the 2 things that you focus on are making sure that you have your departments and your key staff listed, and the staff roster, and your latest information for quarterly goals or launches or programs or services that you're rolling out, the things that are important to the organization. But still start adding in small things that could help a 7-person staff, like links, if you're in a Microsoft environment, links to how to use the other apps that are in Microsoft. Like, not everybody knows how to use Tasks or Planner or even Teams really well. So you can have a little portal or a section of that homepage that has links to training for Microsoft apps. Think of those small things that will bring people to that one space and train them that's where they can find their information. It will save you a ton of time answering questions, and it will help when you start to onboard other people. That culture and that environment will reinforce training to that single source of truth, where everything is the same for everybody across the board. And there's no chance that, Nancy is teaching and training somebody to do things one way, but Bob is training them to do similar but a little bit different. And then there's cloud. Does that answer your question? Okay, good. So, the other ideas to put in there are, creating a learning library, like I was just talking about, external links. Some of you in larger organizations may have memberships to or subscriptions to LinkedIn Learning. This is a great place to put those links and feature the LinkedIn Learning of the week or the month or the quarter. Quick links to your most used documents, a mechanism to provide feedback and suggestions. This is a great way to collect information for your internal FAQ. As you move forward, you may see the benefit in having an FAQ, not just for specific initiatives like return to work, but just overall FAQ. And as people ask those questions, making sure that you track them to see, is this something that's been asked more than once? That might indicate that it is something that lots of people are thinking about. Adding it to your FAQ never hurt anybody to have more information and knowledge than they necessarily need if it's easily scannable. And then, of course, continue to engage in continual maintenance so that your entire single source of truth is up to date. So we have, over the last couple of years, been commingling some of our suggestions for communications channels with the idea of internal podcasting, specifically because we are increasingly in a deskless worker environment. And not knowing each of you personally, I don't know which among you may have a heavy deskless worker environment. But I'm going to, roll out another little story that might be helpful if you do. We are working with a renewable energy organization that spans Mexico, America, and Canada, so all of North America. And they have about 2,000 people out in the field. They do solar panels. And their challenge was, even though they had a great intranet and app, the deskless people still didn't feel involved and they didn't feel informed. And so we'd been talking to them about ways that we could fix that wouldn't cost a lot of money and definitely wouldn't take up a lot of resources. And when we brought up internal podcasting, we got kind of a mixed review. And I understood that. Some people think, well, that's just a whole other set of responsibilities and that's got to be costly to produce. Not the case anymore. In today's environment, being able to produce a podcast takes really nothing more than a podcasting mic and a Zoom connection. You can do it on your own. You don't need to have the shiny, polished organization that comes in for $65,000 to do that for you. And if you have anybody on your team that's just mildly interested in performing that function, they can do it very quickly. Podcasts, unless we're talking about the really big deal podcasts, are trending to shorter and shorter lengths of episodes. So about 15 to 20 minutes is what they're finding to be is the right bite to take off of the apple when they're interviewing somebody or they're talking about a topic. So a 15 to 20 minute podcast produced by somebody in your office that's just interested in doing it, putting it on one of the free platforms that all of your deskless people can interact with means that they don't have to they don't have to learn anything about work after their work hours. They aren't required to get off of work, go home, find a computer, log into it, and then read about what everybody else is reading about during office hours. That's kind of unfair. You can listen to it over lunch. You can listen to it on the train to work. You don't have to be tied to your desk. And for any of you who are Gen X or older, I have to say that if people require me to read all of their information only on my phone, I'm not going to do it. It's too hard. It gives me a headache. I don't feel like I'm getting the experience that I need. It feels too impersonal. I am reluctant to use my phone as my learning mechanism. So if your only other way to reach people through, is long text that they have to use their phone in order to access, you're probably not winning that battle. So something to consider is a way to reach deskless people in a way that could be easy. Pop in your earbuds and listen to the episode of what needs to be heard. Now, we've seen internal podcasting deployed in several different ways, but 3 really successful ways. And I'm going to go from least successful, those successful, to most successful, or least awesome to most awesome. The first is it's a podcast that is dedicated specifically to sharing information from the organization, usually narrated by just the host, or maybe it's the CEO. It's the same person all the time. It's work information coming to you, 15-minute bite-sized piece, done. Very effective. Easy way to get it through your ears, not being in front of your desk. 15 minutes is no sweat off anybody's back. Second way that we've seen it deployed really successfully is when the staff has a voice in what information that they're getting from the podcast. So for example, the staff comes together to suggest a professional in the arena that your association supports, or in the industry that they're working in. People ask for somebody to be interviewed. The host goes and makes that introduction, makes that request, brings them on, interviews them. The people who have requested to hear this information are happy. Everybody's fulfilled. Knowledge is transferred. The number one most successful way that we've seen this deployed, though, is, and this is going to go back to the theme, is when people from the staff are interviewed. When people from the staff are spotlighted on the podcast. And there are a couple of different reasons why this is important, but it is effective in a way that no other platform or media is. I don't know about all of you, but this last holiday season was the first time in a number of years that I went to holiday parties. And I don't just have the honor of working with different clients. Sometimes the client invites us to their holiday parties. And so I went to a couple of them this year. And it was like black and white, super stark. You could tell the organizations that did go about internal podcasting with the interview your staff methodology and those that didn't. It was a stark contrast because everybody's standing there with their little plate of weenies and their Diet Coke or whatever, probably like me in uncomfortable Spanx and even less comfortable shoes, and everybody's looking at everybody around the room. Those that deployed the get to know you staff spotlight types of tools or activities that we've been talking about, people from across the room would engage with each other. People were saying, hey, Nancy, I loved your interview. You talked about how you solved a problem at your last organization, and I'm dealing with something really similar. I wonder if you would mind collaborating with me or mentoring me through this to give me some ideas to be successful like you were. They had a means of starting a conversation and getting to know each other and creating that culture that allows people to start feeling comfortable, start working together, and start trusting each other. Those that didn't had people that would, two people would sit down at a table and chat, and right across the round would be two other people that were chatting, but no, there was no cross conversation. Not that these people were mean, but they just didn't know each other, and they didn't have a mechanism built into the workspace in order to get to know each other or to feel comfortable with each other. So this is one of the benefits of using an internal podcast. Also, it's a great way for continuous learning, for advancing a culture of diversity, and for democratizing innovation and mentorship. So the thing to keep in mind, and I think that I've heard a couple people say this, is that creating a collaborative community does not equal forced fun. Exactly what I was talking about previously. Forced fun was the environment of the holiday party, and I'm not saying don't have holiday parties, but what I'm saying is people getting to know each other on a personal level is really important in order to create trust. Collaborative communities are built on trust. Employees understand that their peers are well trained. People understand the gates of responsibility, meaning when I get something, I know enough about the job ahead of me to know that it's complete. I can do my job thoroughly and hand a completed piece on to the next person. Understanding the gates of responsibility on either side of you is very important in order to do your job well and to hold other people accountable. Staff and peers have developed a shorthand that they count on. Maybe they've done it because they've worked on a project together. Maybe they've done it because they've, been able to play or test or business test assumptions in some way where they know each other's strengths and they know each other's needs. And so they've developed that shorthand that reduces the time to produce the service or the product required. Team member information is readily available to review and act on. And then leadership models collaborative behavior by reaching beyond management to engage with staff directly. Being tapped by the boss to help on something goes a long way to creating not only trust, but confidence that a person is doing their job well, which in turn turns into wanting to make a personal investment in the organization, sticking around to see solutions come to fruition, sticking around to see, if this hybrid work model works well for everybody, and giving the feedback that it takes in order to improve upon that. And then again, when individuals get a regular spotlight in the newsletter, and they get to talk about their skills, talents, and interests, that helps to create trust, it helps to build relationships, and that helps to further your collaboration. Now, these last two slides are just a quick summary of the information that you shared with me, and I think that it aligns with what I've presented. However, if there are feelings out there that you need more information, or I didn't quite drill down into what you need, I encourage you to reach out to me. This isn't a sales pitch. This is I want to be a resource for change for the people in my tribe. Associations are where I started, and you guys matter. You guys really, really matter. You move the needle for so many people in so many ways. So let's make your environments easy, streamlined, efficient, and a place where people are happy to go to work. So your biggest concerns regarding collaboration, retention, and attraction are maintaining a collaborative environment during attrition and onboarding, building motivation, trust, and community in remote environments, face-to-face and spontaneous exchanges that seem to be lacking when we don't have personal proximity to each other, also known as the human element, unproductive or less productive meetings, losing institutional knowledge when people leave, communicating in an unstable or an unsettled environment, serving multiple communication styles, which with tools like the Helix assessment or understanding culture types, you can craft your communication to meet those communication styles. Job satisfaction and motivation, both of which are dependent on thorough internal communications. Sustaining a competitive edge and siloed information, again, both helped with internal communications and the reinforcement that collaboration is the direction that you want your team to go. And then the biggest impediments are maximizing virtual work and minimizing collaborative challenges, distributed teams and gathering staff together, which is very close to the cost related to in-person meetings, unresolved conflicts, culture types and forced socialization. Again, that forced fun piece is no good. Keep trying to have fun, but realize that you're not going to please everybody, even if you survey them all. And that is not the place to create your collaboration. It may be a place to create a little bit of socialization and personal relationship development, but the trust built for collaboration is done in the workplace. Leveraging online comms tools, which I've got some of those for you. Inconsistent comms, staff onboarding and integration, and then legacy staff. I personally wrote, because we've always done it this way, because I've run into that every single time I've had a client over the last 14 years. It's something that we need to address and massage people along the way to build the trust that allows them to go through the change and describing the change and visually describing the change through a change management model that we call the Kurtz change transition model. That I don't have with me, but I'm happy to share if any of you are uncomfortable discussing how change manifests and how you can keep track of it and manage expectations along the way. So with that, that's where we stop and do Q&A. Real quick, I'll just show you the comms tools that I'm sharing are a communication channel best practice, what that means. Messaging campaign model, the 35,000 foot view of what you need to undertake to do that well. Brevity guidelines, headlines that hook, the big idea, why it matters, how to simplify. The four pillars of successful internal communication, the what, why, or the what, where, when, and how, and describing how they matter and what that means underneath those images. A graphic of a really successful agenda template that we recommend using in all your meetings, even if you're small. People need to know what they've missed, what they even missed while they were zoning out, who's responsible for what the accountabilities are, what the next steps are, and then they need to be located someplace where people can see historically the movement on these agendas. And then finally, just an overview of what a single source of truth looks like and why it's important. So I will stop there, and any questions that you have, let's go.
I'll start just to break the ice here. One of the challenges I have in my role as a chief staff executive is really understanding what's happening in an underlying basis among the staff, because I'm the last one they want to come to with a concern about a colleague, for instance, or a counterpart. And so trying to discern when there's an issue to address. We're pretty much fully virtual. We have a very small headquarters operation in DC that allows maybe 3 people at a time to come in. But just the challenge of being able to detect when there are issues that are underlying that you need to address. I think right now we're doing pretty well, but we've had some bumps on the road over the last several years since we went fully virtual. So that's been the challenge, I guess, for me.
So this sounds like it kind of diverges down the HR road, but is the question regarding internal comms or collaboration, how can you take the temperature without getting specific?
Possibly, yeah. How do you take a temperature of folks? You know, it's probably not a mechanistic thing because people differ in terms of how they want to be approached. But you know, just kind of doing a scan occasionally, trying to understand what's happening in the organization in a way that's comfortable for. We're a small staff. We have 9 people, so it's not like I've got 72 like Jennifer has to worry about.
Right, right. So the end run that I usually suggest on that, which keeps it really above the fray and doesn't strike people as tattling or, you know, causing a problem, is engage in periodic stay interviews. And you start the questions with, what's making you stay? What is it that we do here that's so much better than any place else? And what would it take for another place to get you interested in them? And then just going on the line and then sprinkling questions about anything. It's a good way to distribute or disperse the anxiety that one can feel if they're called into the principal's office.
Thank you. It's a good idea.
Dan, the other suggestion I might offer is I got the staff list and I'm constantly doing, and it's a lot of time, but pop-ins, you know, because the more they see you, the more it's not as scary to bring things up. So again, for whatever it's worth, hey, how was your weekend? You know, things that are nothing related to work that build an element of trust. And they're almost, you know, and I would say what I have found personally, you know, customer service, the most distant job from me, is okay picking up the phone and calling me then. So yeah. For whatever it's worth, hope that helps. Because it's scary to call the boss.
Dan, you know, the other thing to an idea is just say, hey, I'd love your opinion. I was thinking about something and I'd love your opinion, because if not, if the boss calls, they're like, oh, shoot, am I in trouble? But if you get in the habit of, sometimes the opinion is, you know, should we have a longer lunch break at the conference? You know, it could be something light, and sometimes it could be something maybe a little meatier. Now they get used to sharing ideas with you versus just sharing problems.
Eliyahu?
Yeah, so Lizabeth, you had a whole field of things to do, right? Like there's this whole long a la carte menu. Is obviously every organization is in a different situation, but do you see any kind of sequential operationalizing of your suggestions? Like, is there stuff that really should be done first and stuff that really can come later?
You know, that's a great operations question. And it's actually one that the peer reviewers that I've worked with, I wouldn't say we worked through quite extensively. The small answer is when we come in and do our work with an organization, we start out with doing the Helix assessment, so we know who we're talking to and how to talk to them. And then we do a small survey about, you know, do you understand the tools that you're using, how to use them, do they work for you? And then we hold one-on-one conversations. They're kind of interviews, but they're mostly conversations for about 60 to 90 minutes with either all of the staff, or if the staff has a really large footprint, a statistically significant sample size. And those 3 steps then give us the information that we need that will help us know which order to implement those 8 steps that I brought up. And that's why I said, you know, this may go in different orders for different people, but the way that we try to attack internal communications, especially if it's an organization with distinct departments where there isn't really a lot of, cross collaborative work. It's very siloed. We try and tackle the internal comms problem across the board from the lowest hanging fruit up. So we're not going from left to right, fix finance, fix comms, fix this. We're going from, is everybody having trouble understanding how you use Teams? Is nobody using the single source of truth? Or do your content creators just really not know how to put together a content calendar and a messaging campaign? Depending on the answers that we get, we know what to tackle first, but we're always going back and forth with the executive or the project lead to make sure that we're managing their expectations. And if there are real pain points that leadership is feeling, but the staff is not, being able to address those in real time too.
Thank you.
It looks like you guys are busy in the chat. I'm just scanning here. Are there any questions in here that I need to address, or?
I just want to tell, this has been a really great conversation. My mind's spinning. We have all the pieces and parts, but the term I often use with my team is intention and purpose. And I think this was a really important reminder that we do a lot, but have we taken that step back? What I put in there is we've been so focused on they're afraid. I'm still afraid I'm going to mandate them back in. That's a real fear for some of them. So creating the support mechanisms or redesigning them towards what future state looks like, it's been really valuable. So I appreciate. I need processing time now.
Well, thank you. That matters to me. It makes me feel really good. Let me ask you this, Jennifer, were you one of the people that filled out the survey?
Yes.
Do you remember the question about work sprints?
Yes.
Did you know what one was, or are you? Okay.
I had no clue. I went and searched. And again, my manufacturing background is equally always a Lean Six Sigma process improvement.
And I
will say to anybody else that has a culture that may or may not be that way, we're 110 years old. The speed at which I move and the speed at which my team can move, I have to really regulate. So that, like, my processing today is what would be the most impactful lever of influence? Because my interpretation of the term work sprints was they've been sprinting for 3 years and they need to stop. And no matter what I say, they still are in sprint survival mode. So I openly say I'm going for a run, gang, go take a walk, but that doesn't change internal behavior when they got on this gerbil wheel. So I don't know what a work sprint was, but I made up my own definition when I couldn't find it.
So that's a really good point, and we may rename this simply because of that. Work sprints for the clients that we've deployed them for are when small organizations, 50 people and under, let's call it 100 people and under, have a dedicated time on the calendar, let's call it once a month, and it's for 3 hours. And it's like an all staff meeting where everybody's on Zoom, but it's not a meeting. And nobody's required to have anything on. It's not about accountability and fannies and chairs. It's about an environment where everybody is together working. You can mute yourself and be on a phone call. You can have your screen off and be doing something crazy behind you. But everybody is in the same space, and allows people to be working on a project and say, oh, you know what? Marianne's on here and I needed to ask her a question. We can go into a breakout room and talk this through. Or we can go and start a project together, but everybody's in the same space and everybody feels as though they're all, pushing the mission forward. It's psychological. It's helpful in creating community. And depending on your culture, that may or may not be valuable. I do think something that's valuable, though, would be the last couple of years I've been speaking at ASQ, the American Society for Quality, and a lot of manufacturer people are in my audience. I'm going to look through some of those presentations and see if there's anything specifically to manufacturing that might be helpful for me to share with you, Jennifer. I just can't remember off the top of my head.
Appreciate
You're
that.
talking-
Thanks.
What you're talking about, Elizabeth, reminds me of anybody who's been in a sales environment, being in what they call a bullpen.
Yeah.
Have real open space, right? We're all kind of here and you can kind of pop up and, talk to people and you're hearing conversations, almost a little bit like that.
Yeah. What else? Let's solve some problems.
Yeah, who's got a challenge that Elizabeth can deep dive into for the next few minutes?
Nobody has any challenges. Everybody's just running full force. And I mean, if you are, that's great. That's really ideally what I want for all of you.
Does anyone have an effective staff meeting?
Denise, describe yours. What makes it effective?
Well, we underwent a really deep dive into our staff meetings about 1.5 years ago because they had just become kind of a rudimentary checklist. So we intentionally designed into our agenda, and it's a routine agenda. We've got some time for open communications. Then we have, everybody provides feedback on if there's something they want to particularly check in on. And then at the end of the meeting, we go through, any commitments that we've made, plus deltas. What was good about the meeting? What do we want to keep doing? And deltas, what's the change that we want to see? And I think it's created a lot of structure around our meeting, and it's become much more valuable to our time to be together for 1.5 hours.
Let me ask the flip side of that. Who is suffering from meeting overload? Very slowly. The client / friend among your peers that we worked with them to implement a week every month of no meetings. The last week of every month is no internal meetings at all. And all of those hours that had previously been sucked up then were freed up to be work up, catch up, do the thing that helps you strategize. And they've really enjoyed it. They've been doing that for, I want to say 8-9 months now, and they're not looking back. So that depending on the way that you work, that might be something that's helpful for your culture, so that feeling of overwhelm and always being on the sprint starts to gradually reduce.
Elizabeth, just to jump off of Eliahu's previous question where he asked about, sort of like what's the top things you should do. A related question might be for those folks who, especially those I think who have small staff and who might have been looking at this presentation like, wow, 55 ideas. Are there any specific ideas, almost like the go-tos, if you remember nothing else, here's like 1, 2, or 3 top tips. Remember to, right? Or try this out kind of thing.
Yep. I would say actually that's excellent, Shira. And it also gives me an opportunity to hopefully engage with you all on LinkedIn. On Sunday, I made a post that will help you understand a little bit more about the human side and personality of me and my team. But without spoiling it, the bottom line is, excuse me, deep dive with your team. If you can, in a smaller organization, take the time to get to know the personal drivers, the personal development, professional development, kids' names, dogs' names of your people. In Lean and Six Sigma, we call it going to Gemba. If you can make yourself present and trustworthy and talk to your staff about things other than work and productivity, it's really important. And it's a game changer. The honesty, the feedback, the innovative ideas that people will feel comfortable coming to you with will astound you. The thing that we learned over this last 3 years through thousands, literally thousands of interviews, is that the Great Resignation didn't happen because people could or couldn't work from home. And it didn't happen because people did or didn't get a bump in pay. It happened because people felt like they didn't either know the values of the organization or they were unaligned with the values of the organization. And if somebody or a team of somebody's, if attrition is important to you and you want to prevent it, let your people get to know you and get to know them. If you can do that and you know, and they know what drives the organization and they feel like, yep, I'm down with that, they will stay with you if they feel like there's a place for them to grow and there's a place for them to share their ideas. Because really, if you think about it, it was like this switch of the flip of a switch. We all were at work one day and then the next day that we weren't. And during that time, the expectation of keeping the wheels on the bus was always there. So people at home in an environment without the resources, without a regular schedule, so to speak, had to figure out how to keep those wheels on the bus. And then when we started trickling back to the office, nobody asked them how they did it. Nobody said, you know what, you came up with some really creative stuff. I'd love to know, how did you solve that problem? Maybe we can use that solution and codify it for future workflow or, you know, SOPs. People want to be acknowledged for what they did to save the organization, and they want to stay if you give them a reason.
Excellent. There's that old expression a lot of us know from Gallup from many years ago: people join companies, but they leave managers. You know, you can change that to people join companies, they leave cultures, they leave team, right? All of this. And it's very, very true, Elizabeth. Thank you for sharing that. Wonderful. So thank you, Elizabeth. Round of applause. Very, very informative, very, very helpful. Very much appreciate this. I will certainly send out the deck. I did get it eventually. And also the video. And while we have one more minute left before we let you all go for your day, I'm hopeful that these deep dives that we've been doing, we've had a couple. Jennifer, thank you for inaugurating us with this, and Elizabeth for continuing this wonderful trend. If there are any other deep dive topics or consultants or folks among you who have subject matter expertise that would like to contribute, as you can see, I'm trying to do these in our intervening case months, right, to do something a little deeper. So feel free to pop it in the chat. You can certainly email me, have a call, what have you. I love to keep the learning going. So anyway, thank you all for joining us. Have a blessed day, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next month for our regular case meeting. Thanks very much.
Hey, Shara.
Yeah.